Liz Kohler Brown, it is so exciting to have you on the podcast today. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm wondering if you can tell folks a little bit about who you are and what your work in this world is.
Sure. So I'm an artist and designer. I mainly do digital art like hand lettering, surface pattern design, greeting cards, things like that. And a huge part of my work is teaching. So I teach classes on my website and on Skillshare, and that's like a huge part of my creative fulfillment is just like planning classes, using my artwork as examples and getting people excited about making stuff.
Yeah, can you share like what type of teaching, like what's the subject that you're actually teaching on?
So mainly my classes are about designing and creating artwork on your iPad. So I would say like 99% of my students have an iPad and want to draw on that. I also do some passive income classes, like teaching people how to do sites like print on demand, Spoonflower, Society6, things like that. Um, and then I also teach people how to create courses because making these classes is like such a joy for me. I like taking other people through that process. So those would be my students who don't have iPads necessarily. Like we have people in there who teach photography classes or teach painting or sewing or whatever. Someone just posted today they're going to do an intuitive sewing class where like instead of measuring and following patterns and stuff like that, you kind of just like cut and sew like as you want, and you're creating these more like artistic pieces. So I get a lot of students like that who are taking like a new spin on a traditional thing. So I love that part of my work.
That is so cool. But
Yeah.
you haven't always done this, right?
Right. Well, I started out in the art world. I knew from an early age that I just loved making stuff.
Mm.
And then when you get into college, it's like, well, choose one. And that was really hard for me. Like I bounced around from photography to painting to took some graphic design classes. I did some textiles. In the end, I chose ceramics because I think partly because I had taken so many ceramics classes and it just kind of felt more natural. I grew up in the Blue Ridge Mountains where there's like potters everywhere. So in my mind, it was like, well, being a potter is like a standard thing. So that would work out. Which is funny now, like living other places, nobody's a potter. And they're like, what the heck is a potter? But to me at the time, it seemed totally normal. But over the years, like just the physical strain of working in clay, it's really heavy. You're constantly lugging stuff around, you're mopping every day because the dust is everywhere and you're inhaling it. And it's a lot, like it's a lot on your body. And I just kind of got tired of it. And it's also, for anyone who's worked in clay, this, you make something and you're like, oh, it looks like this. This is how it looks. And then you put it in the kiln and bring it out and it looks different. And it's like, for me as a creative, I didn't like that transformation of like the kiln has control over the outcome. I like to have like 100% of control. So I think some people love that aspect of clay where it's like, there's like a transformation in the kiln or the glazes do something crazy and it's like a mystery, a fun discovery. But for me, it was just frustrating. I was like, I want it to be like that. And it keeps changing.
I love playing with clay. I think it's really fun to play with, but I think that you're right. It would be such a difficult medium. I find it stressful because you never know if it's going to make it through the whole process. Like there's so many places that it could like literally blow up in some cases. What was that piece of it like for you?
I mean, I think it's a personality thing. Like some people can put a load of pots in the kiln and say like, I know that 10% of these aren't going to turn out well and that's fine. I hated that part. Like, I hated the like uncertainty of like, okay, my little baby, I'm gonna just put you in there and hope you'll be okay. Um, but I know so many potters who just love that. And like, I know as you get better and better, you you have less of that. You have more of the predictability and you figure out why your stuff's messing up. Of course, there's always like room for error, but for me, it was partly the issues with clay, and it was partly that I wanted to travel and I wanted to be mobile. And clay is such a like studio heavy process. Like, you can't be moving your stuff around, and you have to have a kiln, you have to have that like big electricity bill or gas. And so for me, it was like, I just want my life to be easier right now. Like, I want to move around, I want to travel and not have to worry about like, where's my kiln going to go? Do I have to rent a house for a kiln? And so I think for me, it was like limiting my creative process because I didn't feel like I could just make stuff whenever I wanted to.
Right. So how did you transition from that into the next iteration of your career?
So I went to undergrad for clay, and I was like, tried to make the clay business work, and I was just not making money. So I said, hey, maybe if I get a master's degree in clay, then I'll know what to do. By the end of that master's degree, I was kind of realizing like, really the main track for that kind of education is teaching in the university setting. And like, university teaching is changing so much. It's becoming more like adjunct professors, like part-time positions. You're moving around a lot. You're not necessarily like, they're not doing as many tenured positions, and some universities have just stopped doing it. So it's kind of becoming like a dead job, which is really sad, but it's just the way it is.
Mhm.
So I kind of gave it all up. Like, I was like, I don't like working in clay anymore. I'm not going to teach in university. I don't like that process. So I think I'm just going to get like a normal job and be a normal person. So I got a job in a museum, the North Carolina Museum of Art, which you know, I'm sure.
NCMA.
Yeah. Which is a cool place to work. I mean, it's a great place to work, I think, in general, but I was working in a job I didn't like. I was like assistant manager of the box office and like training people. And of course, I got to like be around art and see art every day and talk to people about art, but I mean, it was a desk job, you know,
Mhm.
in a room with no windows all day in a very cold space. And it was just like, I kind of went into like a depression during that time where I was realizing, okay, I went to school and spent all this money, and now I'm not even going to use it, and I'm going to work in a job I hate. And I remember looking at, if you work in a nonprofit in North Carolina for 10 years, or maybe it's the whole country, I don't know, the government will excuse your school loans. And I was like, I only have to do this for 10 years, and then my school loans will go away. I can do that, right? Which was just like a really depressing
Yeah.
view of life for me. I remember Googling when I worked there, like, what's the meaning of life? Which is
Oh
like, that's
man.
when you're at your low if you're Googling
Yeah.
something like that. Um, and so I kind of went through a process where I was like, what do I want to do? Like, why did I go to school for art, and what is this all about? And it kind of came down for me, like, I know I'm happy when I'm teaching. Like, that's something I know. I don't know much about what I want to do, or what medium I want to use, or if I even want to sell my art. But like, I know I'm happy when I'm seeing other people like light up when they make stuff, or have kind of a realization like, oh, I thought I couldn't draw, but actually drawing's just like a skill that you can learn, that anyone could learn. Um, so I knew that because I taught some classes in the past, and I was like, I remember that's a time when I was happy.
Yeah.
And I think I had read like so many books about happiness, trying to figure out like, what am I doing wrong? Like, is it me? Is it my job? Like, and it kept coming up, like, look at times when you were happy. Like, what did that look like for you? And it was always teaching and like interacting with people for me, talking to people, chatting about art, and getting other people excited about it. So I started teaching at local art centers, but it doesn't pay. Like you can maybe make 15, 20 bucks an hour if you're lucky. You maybe can get a few hours a week. If your students don't show up, they'll cancel the class. They forget the materials. That's not like an income, you know?
Like
So I
teaching.
realized, yeah, it's not valued really, which, it's an art center, so I understand. So I realized like I do want to teach, but not this way. So I went to community college after getting a master's degree. I don't know why, but I got a degree to teach English as a second language so that I could teach, immigrants, refugees, people coming from other countries for whatever reason, English. And that was like my first for like transition into teaching online, because I taught at a local community college and then realized like, oh, you can also do like one-on-ones online. So I could do like a few of those on the weekend. So I started doing like 2 or 3 here and there. And then I just loved it. Like I loved, as I knew, teaching, chatting with people. It almost didn't matter what the topic was. It was like, I'll talk about English. Like, I don't care. I just want to like interact with people and have fun with people. And these people were like some of the sweetest, kindest, most loving people. Like the second time you see them, they're like your sister, like, So I loved it. And after I built that up more and more, and at the same time I was working at Spoonflower, and building up my print on demand library, just like making random repeat patterns. And my husband and I started noticing like, man, every month we're like making a little more from our online income. And like, what if we put more time into that and took time away from our jobs that we didn't like? So I asked Spoonflower, like, can I work 4 days a week instead of 5? And no company wants you to do that, but luckily they said yes. So that gave me like a whole day every week to focus on like online income. So that was kind of the transition. Like we just went crazy from there, like a little bit every month, more patterns on print on demand, more teaching online. And eventually it was like enough to quit our day jobs.
Wow. And you wanted to quit the day job because you had dreams of traveling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us about that? Because I think that's the dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk to us about that experience?
So actually my husband and I met in China on a study abroad trip. So he's not Chinese, but we were both on a study abroad trip. And so we met like in that environment of, we both love traveling. We love just like leaving everything behind and living somewhere for a few months. And so we'd been married for several years and we're just dying to like do something else, but we were stuck in these boring day jobs. So that was kind of part of the impetus for like switching everything to online income, was we need to get that freedom back where we can go anywhere.
Yeah.
And one place that kept coming up in all of our searching was Chiang Mai, Thailand, which probably a lot of people have heard of this because it's like a huge hub for Westerners who want to move to somewhere that's low cost, has great internet. Most people speak English, but you've got like that tropical life and great food. So we researched it for probably a couple of years. Like we watched every YouTube video about Chiang Mai. My husband's in like finance type work. And so he had all these spreadsheets that were like, this is the cost of living in Thailand, and like everything down to like, this is the monthly cell phone bill that you would pay in Thailand. And every time we looked at it, it was like, we would spend way less money living there. And so we would have to do less work. Like I could teach less online classes and I could focus more on my art. So we just one day were like, we're just gonna do it. We sold like everything that we owned and just like took a couple suitcases and just landed in Thailand, and we stayed there for a year and a half. But what I love about that whole experience is it gave me time to just sit and think about what it was I really wanted to do, because I think that's one of the biggest traps that we all get into is we're hustling, we're working, we're just going, and we don't have time to just sit and think. And that time is so important for like developing your quality of life and figuring out, who are you? Like, what do you want out of all this? Why are you here? Like, what are your gifts and how are you going to share that with the world? So that's kind of what I did. I like laid in the pool a lot and I learned how to swim and like went like, what's it? Not like synchronized swimming, like real swimming,
Stroke clinic
Yes.
type of thing. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Did you
Just like, go ahead.
did you have a lot of naysayers when you like told your friends and family, we're gonna quit our jobs, we're selling all of our stuff, we're moving to Thailand? Were people generally supportive and excited, or were they like fearful for you?
I think we kind of got everything, like all over the gamut from each person, Some people were excited, some people were like, we'd been married for probably 5 or 6 years, I think. So most people were like, okay, it's time to settle down and have kids now. We're like, we're going to sell everything and move to Thailand. Like, what? So yeah, I mean, we were already so crazy though. I think people weren't that surprised. Like we had moved into the woods and built a tiny house, and we were living in a tiny house. So without electricity, it was like solar and water. So I don't think people were that surprised that like Ryan and Liz are doing something weird. But there were definitely people that were like, isn't Thailand like a weird, dangerous place that, people hear Thailand a lot and think like, oh, Bangkok, like, are you going to go like get a sex change or,
Yeah.
So there's that stigma, but we just did it anyway.
Okay. The more I learn about you, the more I love you. So what was tiny house living like?
It's a struggle. I mean, the way we did it, it was a lot like camping. Like we used rainwater for our water, we used solar for our power. So everything, you had to always be aware of all the like conserving all that stuff. But I think it was also like one of the big things that made me like sit and think about what I wanted to do, because it was of course cheaper than living, like we were living in Raleigh, and so that was expensive. And then when we moved into the tiny house, we were able to kind of save a little bit more, and I could take more time off, and I did gardening and just like sat outside a lot and thought. And that's when I like kind of got over my whole like clay, I hate art part of my life, and started doing some watercolors on the weekends and started just like playing with art a little bit. So I think like the tiny house thing was good and bad because it was rough. Like it's camping. I mean, it's, every day is a struggle. Laundry is a struggle, every little thing. But on the other hand, it like forced us to be outside a lot more. And we had like a rooftop porch, and we would just sit up there and every night, and more time to reflect, more so than when you live in an apartment and kind of living that like 9-to-5 office job life. I also had with Spoonflower, I had a lot more freedom to work at home. So I got to be there a lot, just like working on my computer, and then I could take a break and go walk in the woods. And so I do miss that aspect of it, but I don't miss the like bugs and critters. And sometimes I'd come home and there'd just be like a snake hanging out in front of the door. And it's like, can I come in the house, or are you just gonna hang out there? I'll just wait.
Well, you ended up having kind of a creative crisis. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was like leaving clay was
Leaving
kind of
clay.
my crisis, because I left college and kind of realized like I just can't do this anymore. Like I can't lug the equipment around. I can't find a studio. I can't afford a studio. I don't have much money. So art just was a mistake. Like it was all a mistake. And I just threw out all my art supplies. Well, I donated them. I didn't throw them out, but, and I kind of just was like, that's it. That's when I started my office job, was that moment of like, I just, I made a mistake. I made a wrong decision and I just need to start over. Um, I was wrong about that, but it was an important like moment. I think it's kind of like before you get divorced, you need to have a separation period where you're like, okay, I need to feel my life without you for a while to know if we can really do this. So I feel like that's what I was doing when I dropped clay. I was like, I'm just done with you. I'm just done with art. Art's never going to make me money or support me, and so I don't trust it anymore, and I'm going to get a normal job. I should have been a graphic designer. Blah, I'm done.
What helped you? What helped heal that piece for you so that you were able, so it was like safe for you to venture back into your creative self?
Hmm. I think even though I hated those desk jobs, I mean, I worked at Spoonflower, which is like one of the best desk jobs you can have. Like, it's not going to get much better than that in the desk world. Um, and so I needed that period to like feel this is what it feels like without art.
Mhm.
Like, you have money now, you have health insurance now. This is what it feels like to have all that stuff and have that kind of job. Like, is that what you want? So I think a lot of times you have to feel the other thing, you have to know, because I always had this thing like, why didn't I just become a nurse and like have a normal life and have income and have all that? Like, I should have just done that. And so I needed to like go into that normal world and feel what it feels like to remind myself that like, oh, I'm never going to fit in here. Who am I kidding? They don't even want me here. So I needed that. And I needed some time of like financial support from something so I could build up some savings. And so I think sometimes we need to just get a normal job. Like, if an artist is struggling, I don't believe in the starving artist thing. Like, I think artists need to have something that supports them until their work supports them. And it should be like a slow progression. I think that was my mistake. I thought like, I'm going to come out of college and just make my art world and people are just going to throw money at me and everything's going to be fine. And that's not how it works. Like, it's a very slow progression of, when I started on Spoonflower, we were making $5 or $10 a month. And then it was 20 or 30, and then it was 100, and then it was 300. And we were like, whoa, like this is a thing. Like, it took a long time, I would say a year, before we even really believed that online income could be a real thing. But I think that was the healing process of like, okay, whatever you're doing right now is not working. So just stop
Mhm.
and take some time away from it and take some breathing time and some thinking time to just reassess and then slowly build back in. So part of that was like that confidence coming from selling my work on print on demand. Part of it was like allowing myself some time to play with art. So I would like get out my watercolors on the weekend and just do like silly stuff that I wasn't going to show anybody and I wasn't going to sell, and it didn't matter what the result was. I think we both love the artist way. I know you talk about the artist way, and that's one of her big things is like, you have to play. Like, play is where the creative realizations come from. And if it's always like, I got to sell, I got to make money, I got to make something serious, you're not leaving room for play. So I think that's what that gave me time to do, was like, okay, my desk job is supporting me. We're safe. Everything's fine. You can relax. And now I can play a little bit here and there, even if it's like a few hours a week. Like, that's enough to get you started and help you kind of discover yourself in your creative practice?
I'm also struck very often. I've been personally allowing myself more play than I've ever allowed myself. Like I got roller skates recently and I'm taking voice lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And I signed up for ballet classes, and the ballet classes haven't started yet, but the voice lessons have. And it's creating this, I do, this is my work. I do playful things a lot. But I've never indulged myself in this level of play. Like, I don't think even as a child, I was indulged with the level of play I'm giving myself right now. And I'm not sure what's happening, but there is like this seismic shift that is rumbling inside of me. And it's a direct result of the play. I don't know what's going to come from it yet, but I know it's going to be big. And
Yeah.
So to your point, I think play is paramount.
Yeah. And we think of it as just silliness, I think, in our culture, especially play and just sitting and being. Like, one thing that struck us when we lived in Europe for a while was how much more acceptable it is to just like chill. Like, just sit somewhere, just find somewhere to sit and just chill. And like in our country, that's kind of seen as like either an old person thing or kind of a weirdo thing. It's like, why are you just sitting out there? Like, what are you even doing?
Or lazy.
Right. You're lazy, or, because we work from home, we kind of go out to cafes a lot on the weekdays and we'll like lounge out on our porch. And I can see some of the older folks looking at us like, why aren't you guys at work? Like, why are you always around? Because it's a generational thing too, and it's a cultural thing. But like, we need that time to just play and relax and just like sit and sip a latte for a couple hours and just do nothing, and don't take your devices. And it's so hard to do in the modern world, but it's so necessary.
Yeah, our brains, especially for any type of creativity, whether it's like even creativity in the work, like a more traditional job, I think that is a major missing piece, is that you don't have that thinking time that gives you, I don't know, like I love to, put a blanket down in my backyard and just like look up, stare up into the trees for a little bit without my phone, and allow my brain time to wander. It's like in those moments that I teeter on board, that I'll have like the epiphany, and it wouldn't happen if I didn't have that space.
Yeah, it's so true. It's harder and harder to do the more connected we are with our phones and our devices, but I think that makes it even more of an asset if you can force yourself to do it, because you are thinking beyond what other people are able to do just because they're so busy. And going from like, I saw a funny meme that was like, I reward myself at night by looking at my medium-sized screen because I looked at my small screen all day, and then I might take a break and look at my tiny screen in between looking at my big screen. And it's like, that's kind of what life has become, because we work online and then we check in on the phone in between, and it's just so hard to like disconnect from all that. And I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to start taking my phone and setting it away somewhere when I draw, because I know if it's sitting there, I'll just feel that urge to check it, so I'm trying to get better about that too. I'm not perfect.
Oh, me either. And I'm like trying to build in things for myself that get me away from the screen, where it's like it has to be somewhere in the off or silent position, because if I'm not intentional about it, it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
which is
so
sad.
true.
Yeah. So there's a piece to your story that I'm really interested in, and that you're talking about how like it takes so much work for an artist to build, like it takes a long time for an artist to build a sustainable business and a sustainable practice. And that's really it's not just art, right? It's entrepreneurship in general. It's like creative artists, any entrepreneur, I think that there is this false idea in our culture that, you know, we see all of these big named artists. We've got these people that we admire and we follow, and we think that they happened overnight. A lot, in fact, probably because of where we found them on their journey. We think that that's where they started. Wherever we found them on their journey, that's where they started. But in reality, it happens so much more. Like, everybody has roots that were humble beginnings, and they didn't know if they were going to make it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think the ceramics piece of things taught you about where you are in your business now in regards to that?
I think the big thing I realized is that I didn't want to make things one-off and sell one-off. Like, that's a very hard cycle for an artist to get in. Like, everything you sell is 100% unique. So your body has to produce every dime. And like, it's kind of stressful. It's a lot of pressure. What if you get sick? What if you want to have a baby? What if you want to take time off so you can like pursue a new idea? I realized doing ceramics, like I was always chugging for the next craft fair, for the next show, for the next custom job. And I could never stop. Like, that cycle was never going to stop. And I need that time. Like, I remember when I learned about teachers in universities getting sabbaticals, and I was like, wow, you get to take some months off and like explore. That sounds amazing, right? And you get summers off. Like, that's something I want. So that was a big thing I learned, is that as an artist, if you can set up some passive ways to use your creative skills to pay you over time and consistently and in maybe 5 or 10 different ways, then you can relax a little bit and go deeper in your creative process. Because like, when I started building up my Skillshare, I started realizing, oh, I did one class and I'm done with it. I'm not going to do anything else with it, but it's still trickling. Like, the money's still trickling in. And I made a bunch of patterns on Spoonflower, and like, they keep trickling. And you start to realize when you start that process that, okay, that's 2 things. What if I had 10? Like, I could take a few months off here and there, and I would keep making money, and I wouldn't have to stress about money. So I think artists are lucky that we live in the digital age right now, and that we have the opportunity to do this. For all of history, artists, well, I guess unless you were like really famous and you had people producing your work for you, but we have an opportunity now to sell our work, print on demand, or, you know, sell art prints, or sell classes, or creative assets, or whatever it is you're into, in a way that like supports you over time, rather than trying to like always be using your body for money. Like, it's basically like a wage job, you know, like you go to the coffee shop, you make $20 an hour, and you're not going to get paid when you leave the coffee shop. And so if you call in sick, you're not going to get paid. And so I wanted out of that cycle. And I knew from working at Spoonflower that a lot of people had figured that out. And I was like, I mean, I know my master's degree is in ceramics, but you'd think with a master's degree, I could figure this out, right? Like, how much education do you need to figure this stuff out?
A lot,
But
right?
yeah, but when I realized what it goes into it, I realized like, oh, you don't need any art education to do this. What you really need is like slow, steady work, and like a little bit here and there every day, a little bit of work. And that's what builds it up. I didn't really use any of my art skills building up my passive income, like Spoonflower or anything like that. I just looked at, you know, what is this market missing? What could I make that would fit into that, and make something simple and throw it up and see what happens. Our very first pattern on Spoonflower was I have to give my husband credit for this because he kept pressuring me to do a spoonflower shop. And he was like, what is this whole spoonflower thing? Like, they print stuff on fabric. Like, what is it? It's like, well, I'll just show you. Like, okay, here's a motorcycle. You take a motorcycle and you like repeat it like this. And then you make it for sale like that. And then the next day we sold that pattern. And we were
Wow.
like, oh, well, let's do like 10 or 20 more, just, because it's fun. And then we sold a bunch of those. And then one night we sold one that was like a $50 sale. And we were like, oh, this is not just a joke. Like, this isn't just silly gas money or whatever. This could be a serious thing. So I think that's what it takes, is like dipping your toe into something, whatever that may be. Maybe it's like a local art store who's going to sell your greeting card prints or something like that. Just like dipping your toe in and seeing what bites, and then putting a little more into that over time. For me, that has been the key. Is like my first year of doing all this, I continued teaching, and I was doing freelance marketing work for Spoonflower. So I had like 2 jobs on the side, and then I was doing my own stuff. And then I slowly like scaled back that other stuff as my art supported me more and more. So it took a few years. Like, I think it was maybe 2 years before I was willing to quit my day jobs. And even then I was like, ooh, what am I doing? But I always knew I could go back, like, especially in this world where a lot of our credibility is built on like freelance profiles. Like, I had an Upwork profile with a bunch of clients. I had an italki, which is teaching English, profile that had all my reviews and stuff. So I was like, worst case scenario, like, I'll just drop all the art stuff and go back if I have to. And it wouldn't be too hard to scale back up. So I think that's like part of it, is there comes a point where you do have to jump. But in the beginning, I think it's slow and steady build is the least stressful way to do it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think about, I left after my first job with the yoga studio. I did leap out and did traveling as I was building the business. But then I went back and I worked part-time for a nonprofit for a little bit, helping them build their women independent business owners network, and taught yoga at some studios, and then slowly took, it's like that stuff then slowly went away and went back. But it was, I think sometimes we underestimate just the tremendous amount of time it takes to build a sustainable business.
Yeah. Seriously. It's like you said, like, you look at people and you think that they were born this way. And I actually just did a montage for my class creation workshop to show them like a snippet of my classes every year. And like my very first class that I ever made was, it's so embarrassing. It hurt me to share this with them. I know some of them have probably seen it already because it was on Skillshare, but it was like, I thought that the camera had to be like almost up my nose. Apparently, it had to be really close, of course. And I don't know, I just was so amateur. Like, I had bad audio, video. I was in like an apartment in Thailand and there was nothing on the wall. So it was just like a white wall, and I'm like really pale, and it was just like white, pale. It was a weird situation, but we all start with that like scary, weird stuff and then spend years trying to hide it from everyone.
What I love about that though is so many people probably like fell in love with you and your work from that. It's something that we might now be embarrassed about because we put in so much more work, but our energy, our essence still translated through that. And everyone starts somewhere, and everyone has the ability to keep growing, and we have to start where we are. And that's where you were, and look what you've grown now. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah. And like, speaking of passive income, like that class that I did in, I think it was 2018, still has students every single day and still makes me money. So it's like, that's one of the powerful things about these whole passive income worlds is it's such a like slow building process, but once you have it built, stuff you did 2 or 3 years ago is still paying you. And like, is any company that you work for ever going to care about you a year or 2 years after? No, they're not. Sad but true. But like, your work is going to support you if you're sharing inspiring, beautiful stuff and putting it out in the world. So I think that it's something to consider for anyone, even if they don't feel confident in their creative practice. Like, look for ways to monetize your creative work so that it can support you. And I think it builds more trust with your creative process too. It's like, are you going to support me? Like, should I put more time into you, or are you just going to leave me like you did last time? And so like, the more trust you can build there, I think the more you can take big leaps in your creative work. Like, I think I will take a few months to build a pattern collection because I believe that that will pay me. So I think there's that. If you can build that confidence up through making a little bit of money with your work, you can take on bigger and bigger projects and start doing some big crazy things like Alisha's book. Like, she didn't start out writing books. She started out probably writing little tiny blog posts or little tiny Instagram snippets, and like slowly build up over time. Now she feels the confidence like, hey, I could take a few months or however long it took you and write a book,
Yeah.
and I have that confidence that my creative work will be there for me to support me if I need it. So it's so important to like build that trust, I think.
And all of those small steps along the way that feel like you are not gaining momentum, they are opportunities to build community. And every time we build community, it is growing the foundation of what comes next. And I had the confidence that I could sell some books because I had grown a modest community, and that also was really encouraging. And I know your community is just ginormous. So I know you know what that feels like.
It's true. There is a power behind getting people to, I don't like the whole follow thing because it sounds so guru-ish. I think of it more as a community. Like, I have a community of creatives who believe in me. They trust me to make stuff that they'll like. And when I started my membership, it was like a big leap of faith because it was like, are they going to be there for me? And of course, like a huge number of them were. And they trusted me to like continue that process. So that's another powerful thing about being an artist in the world today is there are so many different ways to get an audience to support you so you can do more creative work, like Patreon, or if you wanted to do something on your own website. I think that there are so many great ways that artists can be supported now. And I mean, it's been that way for all of time. Like, artists have always had patrons, but usually it's been very wealthy people who are supporting one or two artists. Whereas now we have the benefit of, more people have money and people can give little tiny bits of money, maybe $2 a month. And that makes a big difference for an artist to have, 50, 60 people sending them $2 a month. Like, I know that for a lot of people, that's the only way they buy art supplies. So it helps.
It's incredible. Well, you have a little something for listeners today. Is that right?
Yes.
You want to
I
tell
have
us?
my creative goals workbook, which just kind of takes you through my process of deciding what do you want to do with your creative work, and helps you set some short-term goals, long-term goals, and then like a few little things that you could do each day that would work you towards that. So I'm going to share a link with Alisha so you all can see that.
And we'll have that in the show notes. And I feel like everything you touch is just pure gold. So listeners are not going to want to miss out on that. So definitely visit the show notes to download that workbook. And Liz, what else would you like to share today?
I I want to share about a book that I'm reading that I think you all might like. It's a book recommended by Bonnie Christine, who we both work with and know. Um, it's called Deep Work, and it's all about going deep into one thing and not allowing yourself distractions. So one of the things that's really blowing my mind right now is this concept that they introduced in the book called attention residue. So attention residue is like measured in neuroscience. When you think about something or when you interact with something, you think you're done with it. Like you think, oh, I checked an Instagram message and then I'm done. That's the little window of that. But there's actually attention residue from that thing that bleeds over into whatever the next thing you're doing is. And so you can't go deep into the next thing because that residue is leaving, a little like barrier for you to go deep. So imagine if you check your phone every few minutes, how much time you're preventing yourself from going deep. So another example he gives is like, if you check your email in the middle of working, you're creating like a huge swath of time where you can't go deep into your process. So something I'm trying to work on right now is creating like big time chunks for myself where it's like, I'm only doing this thing for the next 3 hours and my phone is going over there and I'm not checking my email and I'm closing my computer. I think like those deep work sessions are key for us creatives to go deep in our creative practice. So whether or not you read the book, I think that's it, it's a little scientific, like it goes pretty deep into this stuff. So it's not just like a light read. But it's fascinating for anyone who likes this like brain science and productivity and going deep in your process. So
That sounds so juicy. Thank you for that tip. Okay, last question for you is how do you live a life of abundance?
I do think this is a struggle for me. I have money issues for sure, and I'm always trying to work through my money issues. I grew up with like nothing. Like my parents were crazy hippies who were like, "Oops, we had a baby." Oh, whoops, we had another one. So they didn't know what they were doing and we had nothing. So I have always had money issues. And I was like partly raised by my Depression era grandparents who were like, that generation never felt like they had money, no matter how much they had. So I am always struggling with like, oh, I shouldn't get that latte over this one because that one's 50 cents more. And it's like, I make plenty of money. Like I make well over 6 figures. Like I'm fine. Don't worry about me. But my mind has this like loop of I don't have enough, or there's never enough, or if you use too much, it'll all be gone. So money is like a big struggle for me. And I'm actually doing a workshop that's like redefine money, redefine abundance. Just because I know I need it. Like I need to feel like, I can hire a marketing director for my business and I can spend that money on that person because I make enough and they'll make me more money. And I need to like believe that will work because I resisted for so long to get an assistant. Like I just was like, nobody can help me. I don't want to waste the money. They're not going to do the work right, blah, blah, blah. Then I had a baby and I was like, okay, now I have no choice. I have to have help or I can't run my business. And now I couldn't live without her. And she supports me in so many ways that I couldn't imagine. So I'm trying to like relearn my abundance issues and like, okay, if I do this thing, good things will come to me. I've always felt free giving away my time. And I've always felt like if I give away my time, good things will come to me. I believe that. But the money piece, I think, so I shouldn't be one to tell anyone about how to be more abundant, but I'm in process.
Liz, oh my God, I feel like we need to have like a part 2 now of this podcast and talk just about this. I mean, I can tell you from today, this week, I just secured the space for my book launch soiree. And I decided I'm going to do it big. I'm going to make it a big event. And so I'm going to shell out some dollars. And I'm like, how am I going to cover this? Like, And immediately the very first thought that I had is like, I can't do this. And then I'm like, oh, hold up, Alisha, like, hold up. That's not how businesses are built. Like, so I had to really talk myself through it. And I think this is another one of those things where a life of abundance isn't just about money, but money sure does grease the wheel. Like it makes things easier, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But what I've realized is like, for me, it doesn't matter how much money I have. Like, I think I could have $10 million and I would still try to get a 50% discount when I order a pizza. Like, it's an ingrained issue that some of us have to just learn to relearn.
So is there any tiny thing that's been helping you with that recently?
I have listened to a lot of stuff about money in the past few months. So I feel like I have 100 things in my head, but let me just tell you a couple that have helped me a lot. So money is energy, right? Money is not real. It's energy. And energy comes out of your body and energy comes out of other things. And if you want to exchange some of your energy for some of that energy, that's a good transaction. So like I bought this Ember mug. This is like, it's an expensive mug because it heats your drink all the time and it keeps it at your preferred perfect temperature. So it's a spend, but I use it every single day and I love it. So I am happy to exchange some energy with the Ember company. I'm not a sponsor or anything, but I'm happy to exchange that energy. Now, if I go to Target because I'm in a bad mood and I go and buy a bunch of crap because it makes me feel good, that is not a good exchange of energy. So I think like for me, that helps to think of it less about dollars and more about energy. Like, did this person create something that I want to exchange? Like, this phone's really expensive, but I use it every day. I use the camera for my classes. I take a lot of photography for my classes. So that is a good exchange of energy. So that's a big thing that's helped me that I think about every time I want to spend money is like, is this a fair exchange? And is my energy worth what that energy is offering me?
I love that so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's going to be really useful to a lot of people. And what it's reminding me of, as I heard Marie Forleo say once, I think it was on her podcast, money and creativity. There's more where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that all the time. It's a mantra of like when that place that I went where I'm like, oh my God, am I going to be able to afford this event space? Am I going to be able to afford everything that went to it? Like the mantra I've had in my head this week is money and creativity. There's more where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for reminding me of that. Well,
I love that.
Liz, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's a pleasure and an honor to talk to you.
Oh, thank you. I love talking to you, Alisha. You're such a inspiration and you just exude like a positive, inspirational energy. Every time I talk to you, I feel like, I don't know, I could do that. I could do something more. Like you have that like motivational energy to you. And that's why I love you.
Thank you. And the feeling is so mutual.
Oh, all right. Well, we'll do this again then. This is part one.
Yes.